Hi, welcome back to Senior Savvy Cannabis. This is Catherine Goldberg. This week, we're joined with lead researcher Alexandra Arnett from NuggMD. Thank you so much for being with us, Alexandra. I'm so excited to dive into some of the facts around cannabis when there's so many misconceptions about this plant.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So there is a poll that's being widely circulated right now about how people are using a lot less alcohol, and it seems as if they're shifting more to cannabis. Um, can you tell me, can you talk about this trend?
Yes, so our poll, basically it just demonstrated that cannabis use is on the rise, especially among, seniors and older adults, and just the general population who uses cannabis. And alcohol is, alcohol use is declining. So we're seeing that shift from people using, that herbal medicine to not, drinking as much with their friends. Maybe they're smoking as much, or, smoking with their friends instead. So it's just kind of a nice shift to see because alcohol, we're learning more and more every day about how dangerous it is, how harmful it is to the body, and your brain, and just, and also your social life as well. Like cannabis use, it's, can be calming, relaxing. Alcohol use is often associated with more aggression and just kind of like a little bit different attitudes when it comes to cannabis and alcohol use. So.
Um, yeah, and I've mentioned on the podcast before that I also run a company that brings the weed bar to weddings and birthday parties. And there is a fundamental difference between the people who are drinking and getting rowdy and the people who are consuming cannabis and giggling and talking about love and how much they love each other. It's a very different energy. So something that we know, but I'm glad that it's being expressed on this global scale. So, can you tell me? So, NuggMD conducted the poll. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, and can you tell me what NuggMD is and exactly kind of like how you went about conducting this poll?
So NuggMD is a telemedicine company that focuses on giving medical recommendations for cannabis to patients in different states. So that's our main focus. We also have a blog where we post educational things all about cannabis, THC, CBD, terpenes, all of that good stuff, just educating the consumer and the patient to help better inform them in their choices. And our poll, I believe it was uh an email poll. I am honestly not 100% on that. We
Okay,
may
that's okay. Okay.
but yeah, it was
Do
an
you have
email.
any idea how many people participated in the poll?
I am not 100% on that. I can double check with our PR guy.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, we'll find out the numbers. So, okay, so just taking a kind of a top contour view and talking about the trends in the poll. What was asked in the poll and how did people answer?
Bring it up here.
Amazing. And I guess we should mention for the sake of transparency is that, this you guys are a platform that helps people get cannabis. And
Mhm.
the poll was sent out to people whose lives have probably been improved by cannabis. I imagine if the same poll was sent out by a vodka company, the results may be different. So, like, let's just be 100% transparent and say that this wasn't like a random sampling of, 100,000 adults across the country. This went out to a demographic of people who use cannabis, and we're going to learn about how their alcohol use changed as they became cannabis users.
So sorry. I'm autistic, so I'm like looking for the data.
Love it, love it.
And
Okay,
I'm like trying to also
for sure. Do you want to do one thing at a time?
yeah, give me 1 second. I'm so sorry I didn't have this data for you before.
That's okay. I also want to do an episode. You can just work. You don't have to listen to this, but about how cannabis does help people on the spectrum in a very fundamental way. Um, I think I would say by kind of toning down some of our responses that might be dialed up just a bit too high, where things are a bit of a sensory overload in a lot of ways, and daily cannabis use can kind of help regulate that in a lot of ways and make a lot of other things easier, like eating and things that are required to be like a functional human being. So we'll have you back for that one.
Yeah. And it's actually funny you mentioned that because I I am in a master's program and my meta-analysis, my research that I'm doing is on cannabinoids and cannabis for autism spectrum disorder and the efficacy of them for the symptoms. So that is my
That's the bread and butter. Okay, okay. So like, yeah, alcohol, like no one's really drinking anymore. It's gross, but happy on for that.
yeah, cannabis is I mean the research for cannabis and autism, it's amazing. And it like uh I know you focus on seniors and it's funny because my grandma before like she was very like iffy on the cannabis. She never smoked or anything, but she always used topicals. And she never drank, but she loved her topicals.
Like lotions.
Yep. Yeah. There was a balm that my friend makes. And so
We
like
all make it, and we all make it for the grandparents.
yep. Yeah. That's how so many companies get started too. Like I know a lot of cannabis companies they're like, yeah, I started making it for my mom, or I started making it for my, friend or my elderly, they were making it for an elderly consumer. And that's how, I mean, yeah, that's how cannabis cannabis helped a lot.
And especially in places like nursing homes where you might really not be able to smoke a joint because of the smell. I know that the topicals are like a really great solution there.
Okay, I found all the information.
Amazing.
I'm like, I got it. Okay. So yeah, so it was a cannabis consumer poll that we did in January, and the question that this specifically related to was, does your cannabis consumption tend to affect your alcohol consumption? There were a total of 381 respondents, and 206 of them said, yes, I tend to drink less or not at all when I'm consuming cannabis. So that's 54% of
That's
respondents.
significant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Since you're the fact checker at NuggMD, have you noticed any other like trends that you feel like society is kind of really kind of shifting into cannabis, where it really is being accepted way more than it was even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when I meant like we got into the industry, or that's when I got into the industry?
Yeah, I would say it is. So we do a conditions report every year, and I'm working on the 2024 one right now. I'm doing all of the data analysis, one of my favorite things to do. And so since we started doing the conditions report in 2022, like we have seen an increase not only in like the states that we're pulling consumers from, so like new states are legalizing every year. More states are adding conditions that like may not have been there before. So
Like
more people,
what?
like autism, for example. More states are adding that. They're adding, I think Ohio was it? There was a state that just added female orgasmic disorder to their
No
list.
way.
Yes. So I thought that was super interesting. Um,
We're gonna do a blog post about for Valentine's Day. Is we might have to link to that.
yeah, it was pretty interesting. I think it was Ohio or Illinois. I have to double check. But
Do you have any data on the types of people who come to NuggMD for support? To kind of start that process of getting their medical card.
so part of our conditions report is kind of from collecting that data. So like there's a significant amount of consumers that are like, under the age of 34 that are seeking to use cannabis. But there's also a lot of patients that are like over 61 that are wanting to use cannabis. We see a lot of patients, like our conditions report, in 2022, we had about 40% of older patients, so people 61 and older that were wanting to use cannabis for arthritis, and then a good amount also seeking to use it for cancer. So we do see that in the older populations versus the younger populations. The younger populations are using it for like stress and nausea, and insomnia.
Interesting.
So
That's super interesting data.
yes.
Um, Very cool. What are, in your opinion, the biggest obstacles to to people not realizing that this plant can help so many different ailments, and it can be tailored to how you want to feel and how you want to move throughout your day. Why do we know, but 95% of the world doesn't?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with like a lack of access to education. We don't often have a lot of bud tender trainings. Like there's not a lot of states where they require like a formal like training course on THC and CBD and all of the little intricacies that you might need to know when you're talking to patients. So, you see a lot more like dispensaries kind of like having to take on that responsibility. And unfortunately, that costs money.
Mm.
Um, and there's also a lot of times where dispensaries don't want to spend that extra money. They're already hurting with the taxes that they have to pay and the fact that they can't write off stuff like that. They can't write off the fact that they paid for a training course for their bud tenders. So, they are less likely to do it, unless, they have a lot of like investment backing. But even then, a lot of those dispensaries don't really care about the medical patient. They're after recreational consumers. Recreational consumers tend to just go for the highest THC. Unfortunately, that's a lot of consumers still. But I my time as a bud tender and as a manager of retail dispensaries, I always tried to educate the bud tenders, educate the consumers and the patients, so recreational or not, just all over trying to get the message across, like, hey, like let's look at the terpenes, like highest THC is not the best, like what about these products, you can use edibles, you can take tinctures, so there's so many different options and varieties for patients and recreational consumers as well. So
What
uh,
state were you a bud tender in, by the way?
I was a bud tender in Oregon, and then I was also a retail manager up there in Oregon as well. And then when I moved back to California, I was a retail manager here.
Okay. Because the one state that I've heard has very rigorous bud tender training is also not a state in Nevada, Las Vegas. I was talking to a bud tender there, and she said there's a written exam, there's an
Mhm.
essay. and they really have to know not only all the vocabulary, but really the science, which is fantastic. I feel like they're leading the way on that. But there's a reason that when people come to Senior Savvy, I call the dispensary and tell them they're coming in first, because I don't want some stone budtender to be trying to sell the grandmas, a 40% THC product. It's not what we need. So these are really good answers. Cool. So I think this is what we should do, because you're fabulous and I feel like we should be friends. We can do a blog post about the results of the poll. I would love to have you back on, if you're interested, to talk about your research with autism. And you can go wild and you can talk about anything you want. And then I will just listen, because I think it's fascinating. Okay. And regardless of, the thing is, like, people of all ages have autism or exist on the autism spectrum as humans do. So it really, even if we say that the diagnosis is going up among a certain age group, it doesn't mean it's not affecting another age group. So I feel like we can have a very human conversation about that. And something just that maybe we can marinate on until the next time is that I read, and I don't have the statistic to back this up, but that unfortunately people with autism have like a much higher suicide rate than the not autistic population. This is very problematic for a lot of reasons. We have seen that medical cannabis decreases the suicide rate for men with PTSD. Obviously, very different things going on, but perhaps this could be the intervention that is needed to kind of get a handle on that. So I don't know if you're like the numbers really like dive into that, obviously, but let's set up our next conversation and like we'll just go wild and nerd out on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's actually interesting that you mentioned the PTSD though, because a lot like you see it in older autistics that like they're the suicide rate's higher, but a lot of them may have also gone undiagnosed and they may have struggled for a really long time, and being undiagnosed autistic, that can actually lead to PTSD.
Wow. That doesn't surprise me. And let's just let that sink in, that it's not, you don't have to be caught up in warfare for one's brain to change in response to something very confusing and unpleasant. So fabulous. Happy no time. Okay, cool. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Yes. And let's follow up via email and we can set up a time to dive into your research on autism and cannabis. And like I told you before we even started recording, like, you're making such a difference. So thank you for your work and thank you for your enthusiasm. And I'm thrilled that we're spreading the message together.
Definitely. Yes, I'm very excited.
Awesome. Okay, cool. We'll have a fabulous day and I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. You as well. You too.
Okay, bye.